The idea that cloud gaming could replace consoles sounds simple on the surface, but the truth behind it is far more complicated and, in some ways, far more uncomfortable for the gaming industry. Every few years, a new promise appears, saying that this time hardware will finally disappear, that discs, downloads, and expensive boxes under the TV will no longer matter, and that games will live entirely in the cloud. Yet consoles are still here, stronger than ever. So the real question is not whether cloud gaming exists or whether it works at all, but whether by 2026 it can truly replace consoles in the way many companies quietly hope it will. To understand that, we need to go back to why consoles became so important in the first place, and why cloud gaming keeps struggling against the same invisible wall that technology alone cannot break. For decades, consoles have survived not just because they play games, but because they offer certainty. When someone buys a console, they know exactly what they are getting. They know the performance target, the controller feel, the offline access, and the sense of ownership that comes with having the game installed locally. This reliability is something gamers rarely talk about, but they feel it every time they press a power button and a game launches instantly without worrying about servers, internet speed, or service outages. Consoles grew in a world where internet connections were slow, unstable, or simply unavailable for many players, and they evolved to be self-contained machines that worked the same way everywhere. That foundation shaped how games were designed, how players formed habits, and how entire generations learned to trust physical hardware. Cloud gaming, on the other hand, was born with a completely different promise. Instead of owning a powerful machine, players would stream games from remote servers, similar to how movies are streamed on platforms like Netflix. The idea sounded revolutionary because it removed the biggest barrier to entry: expensive hardware. In theory, anyone with a screen and a controller could play high-end games without worrying about upgrades, storage space, or system requirements. This promise has existed for much longer than most people realize. Even in the late 2000s, companies were already experimenting with remote rendering and game streaming, long before internet infrastructure was ready to support it. These early experiments often failed quietly, not because the idea was bad, but because the timing was wrong. One of the first major attempts to bring cloud gaming to the mainstream was OnLive, a service that launched in 2010. At the time, it felt like the future had arrived too early. OnLive allowed players to stream full PC and console-style games directly to low-end devices, including laptops and even tablets. The technology worked, but only under perfect conditions. Latency was noticeable, image quality dropped during fast movement, and input delay made precise gameplay feel uncomfortable. Critics praised the ambition, but warned that the experience was fragile. When internet quality dipped, the entire illusion collapsed. OnLive eventually shut down, not because people did not want cloud gaming, but because they were not willing to accept its compromises. This pattern repeated itself again and again. Each new cloud gaming service arrived with confidence, impressive demos, and bold claims about the end of consoles. Each time, reality pushed back. Latency remained the biggest enemy. Even a small delay between pressing a button and seeing an action on screen could break immersion, especially in fast-paced games like shooters, fighting games, and action titles. Unlike video streaming, games are interactive, and that interactivity demands instant feedback. The human brain is extremely sensitive to delay, even when it is measured in milliseconds. This is not a problem that can be fully solved by marketing or optimism. It is a physical limitation tied to distance, network congestion, and infrastructure quality. As internet speeds improved in the mid to late 2010s, cloud gaming slowly returned to the conversation. Broadband became more common, mobile networks advanced, and data centers grew more powerful. This led to a new wave of services that believed the time was finally right. Companies like Google, Microsoft, Nvidia, and Amazon entered the space, each with a different vision of what cloud gaming should be. This time, the technology was more mature and expectations were higher. But with higher expectations came deeper scrutiny, and the cracks became harder to hide. Google Stadia was perhaps the most ambitious and the most revealing experiment. When it launched, it promised console-quality gaming with no downloads, no patches, and no hardware upgrades. Players could jump into games instantly from a browser or a Chromecast device. On paper, it sounded like a dream. In practice, Stadia exposed the emotional side of gaming that technology alone could not replace. Players struggled with the idea that they did not truly own their games? If Stadia shut down, what would happen to their purchases? This question haunted the service from the start, and when Google eventually announced Stadia's closure, it confirmed the fears many players already had. Even though refunds were issued, trust was damaged in a way that numbers could not fully explain. This is where cloud gaming faces its first major obstacle in replacing consoles: ownership and permanence. Consoles are physical objects that give players a sense of control. Even digital purchases on consoles feel anchored to a device that sits in the living room. Cloud gaming removes that anchor. Games exist on servers owned by companies, and access depends entirely on ongoing service support. For players who grew up building collections, replaying old favorites, and preserving gaming history, this shift feels risky. It is not just about access today, but about certainty tomorrow. And this concern grows stronger the longer people spend money inside ecosystems that can disappear overnight. Microsoft approached cloud gaming differently, and in many ways, more cautiously. Instead of positioning it as a console replacement, Xbox Cloud Gaming was introduced as an extension of the Xbox ecosystem. Players could stream games they already had access to through Game Pass using phones, tablets, or low-end PCs. This strategy reduced resistance because it did not ask players to abandon consoles entirely. Instead, it framed cloud gaming as a convenience feature, rather than something final. This decision was not accidental. Microsoft understands that forcing players to choose between cloud and console would likely push many away. Even so, Xbox Cloud Gaming reveals the same underlying tension. When the experience is good, it feels magical. Games load quickly, performance is stable, and the freedom to play anywhere feels genuinely liberating. But when conditions are less than ideal, the illusion breaks. Input lag becomes noticeable, visual artifacts appear, audio desyncs. These issues do not happen all the time, but the fact that they can happen at all changes how players emotionally connect to the experience. Consoles rarely ask players to think about their internet connection once a game is installed. Cloud gaming demands that awareness constantly, even when everything is working well. NVIDIA's GeForce NOW took yet another path, focusing on PC gamers and allowing them to stream games they already own on platforms like Steam and Epic Game Store. This solved the ownership problem more elegantly, but it introduced new complexities. Game publishers could choose whether to support the service, leading to sudden removal of popular titles. This highlighted another uncomfortable truth about cloud gaming. Control shifts away from players and toward agreements between companies. A game can vanish not because the player did anything wrong, but because a contract changed behind the scenes. Consoles are not immune to licensing issues, but the impact feels stronger in a cloud, where access is immediate and absolute. As all of this unfolded, console hardware continued to evolve. The PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series consoles delivered faster load times, higher frame rates, and more stable performance than ever before. These improvements quietly raised the bar for cloud gaming. It was no longer enough to match last-generation consoles. To replace consoles, cloud gaming would need to match or exceed current hardware while maintaining consistency across millions of users. This is a massive technical challenge that goes beyond raw server power. It requires global infrastructure that can deliver low latency connections in cities and rural areas alike, across different countries with wildly different network standards. This is where the conversation becomes less about technology and more about reality. In many parts of the world, reliable high-speed internet is still not guaranteed. Even in regions with strong infrastructure, network congestion, data caps, and inconsistent Wi-Fi environments remain common. Cloud gaming assumes an ideal connection that does not exist for everyone, and this assumption limits its ability to fully replace consoles. A replacement must work for the majority, not just for those with perfect conditions. Until that gap closes, consoles retain a crucial advantage that cannot be ignored. There is also the question of how games are designed. Most modern games are built with local hardware in mind. Developers optimize for known console specifications and predictable performance targets. Cloud gaming introduces variables that are harder to control. While some developers are experimenting with cloud-native features, such as massive simulations or server-side processing, these ideas are still in early stages. For now, most cloud games are simply streamed versions of console or PC titles, not experiences designed specifically for the cloud. This means cloud gaming is often following consoles rather than leading them. As we move closer to 2026, the pressure is increasing. Subscription services are expanding. Publishers are experimenting with new distribution models. Hardware prices continue to rise, making the cloud more attractive on paper. At the same time, players are becoming more aware of the trade-offs they're being asked to accept. Convenience is powerful, but trust is fragile. The industry stands at a crossroads where replacing consoles entirely could mean losing the very audience that made gaming what it is today. And this leads to a quiet but important question that lingers beneath every announcement and every demo. If cloud gaming becomes good enough, will players actually want it to replace consoles, or will they resist in ways that no benchmark or latency test can predict? The answer is not just technical, and it may depend on something the industry has underestimated for years. Because the next phase of cloud gaming is not just about whether it works, but about who controls it, who benefits from it, and what players are asked to give up in return. And once those trade-offs become clear, the conversation changes in ways that technology alone cannot fix. This is only the beginning of the story. As cloud gaming moved past its early experiments and public failures, something subtle but important began to change inside the industry. The conversation slowly shifted away from asking whether cloud gaming could work at all and toward asking how much compromise players were willing to accept. This shift matters because consoles did not earn their place by being perfect. They earned it by being predictable. Predictability is an invisible feature, but it is one that gamers rely on deeply. When someone buys a console game, they expect it to run the same way every time they launch it. Cloud gaming challenges that expectation at a fundamental level, and that challenge becomes more obvious the longer someone uses it. Latency is often discussed as a technical problem, but it is better understood as a trust problem. When latency exists, even at low levels, it introduces doubt. Players begin to question their own skill. Was that missed shot their fault, or did the input arrive late? Did the dodge fail because of timing or because the stream dropped a frame? These moments may seem small, but over time, they change how players feel about the experience. Consoles rarely create that doubt. When something goes wrong on a console, players usually blame themselves or the game design, not the delivery system. Cloud gaming quietly shifts that blame to the connection, and once players start noticing it, they cannot unsee it. This is especially important in competitive and action-heavy games. Genres like first-person shooters, fighting games, racing games, and fast-action RPGs depend on tight input response. Even slight delays can make these games feel less satisfying, even if the visuals look impressive. Cloud gaming services often promote how well slower-paced games run, such as turn-based RPGs or strategy titles, and they are not wrong. These genres hide latency better, but consoles are not built only for slow games. They are built to handle the full range of experiences, from calm to chaotic, without asking the player to adjust their expectations. Another issue that rarely gets enough attention is consistency over time. A cloud gaming session might feel great today and worse tomorrow, even on the same device. Network conditions change constantly due to factors outside the player's control. Local congestion, ISP routing changes, server load, and even weather can influence performance. Consoles isolate players from these variables. Once a game is installed, it does not care what the internet is doing. That separation creates a sense of reliability that cloud gaming has not yet matched, and by 2026, this difference still matters more than many industry forecasts admit. Then there's the issue of data caps and bandwidth limits. In many regions, internet plans still include restrictions that make heavy streaming impractical. Cloud gaming consumes a large amount of data, especially at higher resolutions and frame rates. A single long gaming session can use more data than hours of video streaming. For players with limited plans, this turns gaming into a calculation rather than a relaxation. Consoles, once installed and updated, barely touch data usage during play. This difference becomes more important as games grow longer and more immersive. The business side of cloud gaming adds another layer of complexity. Subscription models are becoming central to the cloud strategy, but subscriptions change how players relate to games. Instead of building a personal library, players gain temporary access to rotating catalogs. While this model works well for discovery, it weakens long-term attachment. Games become disposable experiences rather than lasting possessions. Consoles support subscriptions too, but they coexist with traditional ownership. Cloud-first platforms often push subscriptions as the primary or only option, narrowing player choice in subtle ways. Publishers are paying close attention to this shift. Cloud gaming gives them more control over distribution, access, and pricing. Games can be updated, modified, or removed without player consent. From a business perspective, this is powerful. From a player perspective, it can feel unsettling. The balance of power moves away from the audience and toward platforms and publishers. Consoles still involve platform control, but physical hardware and local installs create friction that protects players from sudden changes. Cloud gaming removes that friction, and not everyone sees that as progress. There is also the question of preservation. Video games are cultural artifacts, not just products. Consoles allow older games to survive through physical copies, backward compatibility, and emulation. Cloud gaming relies on servers running specific versions of games, often tied to licenses that expire. When a cloud service shuts down or loses rights, those versions of games can disappear completely. This is not a theoretical concern. It has already happened. Entire libraries have vanished when services ended, leaving no legal way for players to access what they once paid for. By 2026, this issue becomes more visible, not less, as more games exist only in digital and cloud-only forms. Hardware still plays a psychological role as well. Consoles are objects that mark a commitment to gaming. They sit in living rooms, bedrooms, and entertainment centers as a clear signal of identity. Cloud gaming tries to remove that physical presence, but in doing so, it also removes part of the ritual. Turning on a console, holding a dedicated controller, and settling into a familiar setup creates a sense of occasion. Playing through a browser or an app does not yet carry the same emotional weight for many players. This may sound minor, but gaming has always been more than raw access. Even controllers reveal an interesting divide. Cloud gaming often relies on standard controllers connected wirelessly to various devices. This flexibility is convenient, but it can also introduce additional latency layers. Consoles optimize the entire input pipeline, from controller to hardware to display. Cloud gaming adds more steps, more points of failure, and more variability. Some players adjust quickly. Others feel the difference immediately and never fully adapt. This split in player tolerance is one of the biggest obstacles to full replacement. As 2026 approaches, improvements in network infrastructure are real but uneven. Fiber expansion, 5G, and future wireless technologies promise lower latency and higher stability. In ideal conditions, cloud gaming can already feel close to local play for certain genres, but replacement requires consistency across millions of users, not just success stories in controlled environments. The industry often showcases best-case scenarios, but players live in average-case reality. An average-case reality still favors consoles more often than cloud advocates admit. There is also the cost question. Cloud gaming is often marketed as cheaper, but long-term costs are harder to calculate. Subscriptions add up over time. Premium tiers promise better performance, but raise monthly fees. Consoles require upfront investment, but ownership can become cheaper in the long run, especially for players who buy fewer games or replay older ones. By 2026, this cost comparison becomes less clear, not more, as services adjust pricing to remain profitable. Perhaps the most important factor is choice. Consoles give players options: offline play, physical media, digital downloads, mods in some cases, and varying levels of engagement. Cloud gaming narrows those options in exchange for convenience. For some players, that trade is worth it. For others, it feels like a loss. Replacement implies removing the alternative, and history shows that gamers resist being forced into a single way of playing. What makes this moment so interesting is that cloud gaming does not need to replace consoles to succeed. It can coexist, complement, and expand access without demanding exclusivity. But the question remains, will companies accept coexistence, or will they push for replacement because it offers more control and predictable revenue? That tension shapes every decision being made behind the scenes right now. And as services grow, deals shift, and players invest more time and money into cloud ecosystems, another question quietly grows louder. What happens when cloud gaming stops being an optional and starts being the default? The answer to that may define the next decade of gaming in ways ways that go far beyond performance metrics or subscription numbers. And we are not there yet, but the path toward that future is becoming clear, and not everyone will like where it leads. As cloud gaming platforms continue to mature, the role of the biggest players in the industry becomes impossible to ignore. Microsoft, Sony, Nvidia, Amazon, and a handful of others are not experimenting anymore. They're investing long-term, building infrastructure, signing deals, and quietly shaping how cloud gaming fits into their broader strategies. What is interesting is that none of these companies, at least publicly, are saying the same thing. Their actions suggest different beliefs about whether cloud gaming should replace consoles or simply live alongside them. Microsoft's approach is the most revealing. Xbox cloud gaming is tightly connected to Game Pass, which has become the center of Microsoft's gaming strategy. Instead of pushing players away from consoles, Microsoft keeps reinforcing the idea that Xbox is not a box, but an ecosystem. You can play on console, PC, or the cloud, often using the same account and the same subscription. This sounds generous, but it also changes how players think about access. Games become something you enter rather than something you own. For many players, this feels freeing at first. There is no pressure to commit to a single game. Everything feels available. But over time, something subtle happens. When access is endless, attachment weakens. This matters because attachment is what keeps players loyal across generations. Consoles are often remembered not just as machines, but as eras of life. The games people owned, the discs they traded, the save files they protected. Cloud gaming struggles to create that same sense of personal history. When everything is streamed and temporary, memories feel less anchored. Microsoft seems aware of this risk, which is why consoles still exist in their lineup, and likely will for years. Cloud gaming, for them, looks less like a replacement and more like a safety net, a way to keep players inside the ecosystem even when they are away from their primary device. Sony's position is more cautious, and that caution speaks volumes. PlayStation has built its identity around high-quality exclusives, cinematic single-player experiences, and tightly controlled hardware performance. These games are designed to show off local hardware at its best. While Sony has experimented with cloud streaming through PlayStation Plus and earlier services, it has never fully embraced a cloud-first identity. This is not because Sony lacks the technology, but because its business model depends heavily on the premium experience that consoles deliver. Streaming those experiences risks reducing their perceived value. There is also a technical concern. Many PlayStation exclusives rely on fast local storage, precise input timing, and carefully tuned performance. These elements are harder to guarantee in a cloud environment. Sony understands that a compromised first impression can damage a brand built on polish. As a result, cloud gaming remains an option, not a promise. This restraint suggests that even major industry leaders are not convinced that cloud gaming is ready to stand alone. Nvidia's GeForce NOW continues to occupy a unique position. It does not sell games directly, and it does not try to replace consoles or PCs outright. Instead, it positions itself as a bridge. You bring your own games, and Nvidia provides the hardware remotely. This model respects ownership more than most cloud services, but it also exposes the fragility of cloud ecosystems. When publishers pull support, games disappear instantly. Players have no recourse. The service works best when everyone cooperates, but gaming has never been an industry defined by cooperation alone. Competing interests, licensing disputes, and shifting strategies can disrupt access at any time. Amazon Luna entered the space quietly and cautiously, which may be a sign of realism rather than weakness. Amazon understands infrastructure better than almost anyone, but it also understands consumer behavior. Luna has not tried to declare the end of consoles. Instead, it focuses on casual access, family-friendly experiences, and integration with existing Amazon services. This positioning suggests that Amazon sees cloud gaming as one piece of a larger digital lifestyle, not the centerpiece. In that sense, Luna may reflect the most honest view of cloud gaming's role in the near future. What all these approaches have in common is hesitation. None of these companies are willing to fully abandon consoles yet. That hesitation tells us something important. If cloud gaming were truly ready to replace consoles by 2026, the shift would be more aggressive. Hardware production would slow. Marketing would change. exclusive cloud-only titles would appear at scale. Instead, we see hybrid strategies, careful language, and gradual expansion. This is not the behavior of an industry confident in a single future. Another factor shaping this hesitation is the developer experience. Making games for consoles is demanding, but predictable. Developers know the hardware, the tools, and the audience. Cloud gaming adds new layers of complexity. Testing becomes harder because performance varies by location and connection quality. Debugging issues related to streaming is more difficult than fixing local bugs. Developers also have less control over how their game is experienced when it runs on remote hardware. This lack of control makes many studios cautious, especially when first impressions can determine a game's success. There's also the issue of monetization. Cloud gaming platforms often favor engagement over ownership. This pushes developers toward live service models, recurring content, and long-term retention strategies. While this works for some genres, it does not suit every type of game. Story-driven, finite experiences risk being undervalued in subscription-heavy ecosystems. Consoles still support a wide range of business models, from big-budget blockbusters to niche indie titles. Cloud-first platforms tend to reward games that keep players subscribed, not necessarily games that leave a lasting impression. Players are beginning to notice this shift, even if they do not always articulate it clearly. There's a growing sense that gaming is becoming less about finishing something meaningful and more about staying connected. For some, this is fine. For others, it feels like a loss of purpose. Consoles still represent a space where a game can be complete, self-contained, and personal. That difference matters when asking whether cloud gaming should replace them. Then there's the question of offline life. Consoles continue to work when the internet goes down. They work during travel, outages, and in places where connectivity is limited. Cloud gaming does not. This dependency is easy to ignore when everything works, but it becomes painfully obvious when it does not. Replacement implies reliability in all common conditions, not just ideal ones. By 2026, this limitation still exists, and for millions of players, it's a deal breaker. At the same time, cloud gaming is improving. Compression is getting better. Server locations are expanding. Input prediction techniques are reducing perceived latency. These advances are real, and dismissing them would be dishonest. For many players, especially those who value convenience over precision, cloud gaming already feels good enough. And when something feels good enough, habits begin to change. This is how shifts happen, not overnight, but slowly, quietly, through everyday use. This is where the real tension lies. Cloud gaming does not need to be perfect to grow. It only needs to be acceptable for enough people. As more players get used to streaming games, their tolerance for imperfections may increase. What feels unacceptable today might feel normal tomorrow. Consoles benefit from familiarity, but familiarity can fade over time. The question is whether that shift will happen fast enough to make replacement realistic by 2026, because replacement is not just about technology catching up. It's about players letting go of ownership, offline access, physical presence, and long-established habits. Some will do it willingly. Others will resist quietly by sticking with what they know. The industry cannot force that decision without consequences. And that brings us to the most uncomfortable part of the conversation. If cloud gaming does replace consoles, it will not be because players demanded it. It will be because the industry found ways to make alternatives less attractive. And whether that future feels like progress or loss depends entirely on where you're standing when it arrives. We are getting closer to the point where that choice becomes real, and once it does, there may be no easy way back. As this slow shift continues, it becomes clear that the future of cloud gaming is not being decided only by performance tests or server upgrades. It is being shaped by behavior, how people actually play games, where they play them, how much time they have, and what they expect when they sit down to relax. Consoles were built around long sessions in fixed spaces. Cloud gaming quietly challenges that by fitting into smaller moments, short breaks, shared screens, portable devices. This change sounds harmless, even helpful, but it also reshapes what kinds of games thrive. thrive. When playtime becomes fragmented, game design adapts. Developers begin to favor systems that reward frequent check-ins rather than deep focus. Progress is broken into smaller pieces. Mechanics are simplified. This is not inherently bad, but it does change the feel of gaming over time. Consoles still encourage longer, uninterrupted sessions. They invite players to sink into worlds, to commit attention. Cloud gaming often encourages flexibility instead. The question is whether flexibility can replace depth or whether something important is lost along the way. There is also a generational factor at play. Younger players who grow up with streaming as the default may not feel the same attachment to hardware. To them, access matters more than possession. If a game works on whatever screen is nearby, that feels natural. Consoles can seem bulky, old-fashioned, or restrictive by comparison. This generational shift is often cited as evidence that cloud gaming will eventually win, but generational change is rarely uniform. Many young players still value consoles, especially when they offer performance, exclusives, and social spaces that feel stable and familiar. Social gaming itself reveals another divide. Consoles create shared physical spaces. Friends gather around a TV. Controllers are passed around. Even online play is anchored to a specific place. Cloud gaming spreads play across devices and locations. This makes gaming more personal, but also more isolated. Voice chat replaces presence. Convenience replaces ritual. Some players prefer this, others miss the sense of shared space. Replacement would mean accepting that trade-off as the norm. Another often overlooked factor is latency tolerance across regions. In countries with dense server coverage and strong infrastructure, cloud gaming feels far more viable. In regions with less investment, the experience degrades quickly. Consoles level this imbalance. A console performs the same way regardless of region once it is in a player's home. Cloud gaming magnifies global inequality in infrastructure. By 2026, this gap will still exist. A technology that works brilliantly in one place and poorly in another struggles to replace a universal alternative. Energy use and environmental impact also enter the conversation. Cloud gaming shifts energy consumption from homes to data centers. On the surface, this looks efficient, but large-scale server farms consume massive amounts of power and require constant cooling. Consoles consume energy too, but they distribute that cost across millions of households. The long-term environmental trade-offs of cloud gaming are still being studied, and the results are not simple. Replacement would mean accepting a centralized model with consequences that are harder for consumers to see or influence. Then there is the issue of mods and customization. On consoles and PCs, especially PCs, players can modify games, tweak settings, install community content, and shape experiences beyond what developers intended. Cloud gaming limits this almost entirely. The experience is locked down for stability and security reasons. This makes sense technically, but it removes a layer of creativity that has defined gaming culture for decades. Replacement would mean losing not just hardware, but a culture of experimentation. Even accessibility presents a mixed picture. Cloud gaming can lower barriers for some players by removing the need for expensive hardware. At the same time, it raises barriers for others by requiring stable, fast internet. Consoles can be shared, used offline, and resold. Cloud access is personal, account-based, and dependent on ongoing payment. Whether cloud gaming is more inclusive depends entirely on circumstances, and that inconsistency makes full replacement difficult to justify. As companies look toward 2026, marketing language becomes carefully chosen. Cloud gaming is described as the future, but rarely as the only future. Phrases like play anywhere, play instantly, and no limits appear often. What is missing are promises about permanence, ownership, and preservation. These absences are not accidental. They reflect unresolved problems that technology has not solved yet. And players notice what is not being said just as much as what is. There is also the reality of failure. When a console generation ends, the hardware still exists. Games still work. When a cloud service ends, everything vanishes. This finality is unique to cloud platforms. It creates a risk that consoles simply do not have. By 2026, more cloud services will have come and gone, and each closure leaves behind cautious players who hesitate to fully trust the next promise. All of this leads to a conclusion that feels less dramatic than early predictions, but far more realistic. Cloud gaming is not replacing consoles, it is circling them. It fills gaps, extends reach, and offers convenience where consoles cannot. It succeeds best when it does not ask players to give up what they already value. The more it pushes toward replacement, the more resistance it encounters. Yet, the story is not finished. Technology keeps advancing, habits keep changing, economic pressure keeps rising. Consoles are becoming more expensive, subscription fatigue is growing, internet infrastructure continues to improve unevenly. These forces push and pull against each other, shaping a future that refuses to settle into a simple answer. So when we ask whether cloud gaming can truly replace consoles in 2026, the most honest answer is not yes or no. It is that replacement is the wrong question. The real question is how much space cloud gaming will take and what consoles will become in response. Will consoles narrow their focus and become premium devices for those who demand the best? Will cloud gaming become the default entry point for casual and mobile players? Or will something entirely unexpected disrupt both? What we can say with confidence is this. By 2026, cloud gaming will be impossible to ignore, but consoles will be impossible to erase. They will coexist, compete, and influence each other in ways that reshape gaming quietly rather than explosively. The future will not arrive all at once. It will arrive in small choices made by millions of players, day after day. And that may be the most important thing to remember. The future of gaming is not decided in boardrooms alone. It is decided every time someone chooses how and where they want to play. In the end, cloud gaming does not need to kill consoles to matter. It only needs to change what players expect, and once expectations change, the industry always follows. So, can cloud gaming truly replace consoles in 2026? Not completely, not cleanly, and not without losing something along the way. What comes next will depend on whether players are willing to trade certainty for convenience, and whether the industry respects the value of choice while chasing the promise of control. That balance will define the next era of gaming. To quickly recap, cloud gaming has grown faster than ever, improved in real and meaningful ways, and proven that high-end games can be streamed under the right conditions. But consoles still offer reliability, ownership, offline access, creative freedom, and emotional connection that cloud platforms have not replaced. By 2026, cloud gaming will expand, not dominate, and consoles will remain essential for millions of players worldwide. If you enjoyed this deep dive and want more long-form gaming documentaries like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Drop a like if this helped you see cloud gaming from a new angle, and share your thoughts in the comments. And if you know someone still debating cloud versus console, share this video with them.